Hello and welcome to Cinema Eclectica, part of the Geek Show podcast network. We are the Geek Show's dedicated movies podcast. I'm Graham, and this week I've been joined by Mick.
Hello.
And Rob.
Hello. I was trying to pronounce a Russian name earlier. It didn't go well.
It was just Zs. How can you have a whole language which uses so many Zs?
I don't know. It's not even a real language.
Well, that's this year's potential new Cold War inflamed.
Yeah.
Usually it's the French which are the problem that I have, and I pick a fight with them for no reason and just be really petty.
Who needs Donald Trump when you've got Rob?
I think it's time to spread my love around and, just say, Russians, what's going on with all your letters and your words?
Yeah, I think there's a special podcast for that kind of behaviour.
What you should really do is recast all of your Russian people as beloved character actors from the 90s and 80s, and I think Russia would just be a better place.
Oh, well, keep that recasting thought in mind, because we'll be dealing with that a bit later. But for now, we have our film of the week, which is a Netflix release. It's Gina Price Bythewood's, she plays Bythewood's, Gina Price Bythewood's new film, The Old Guard, which is adapted from a Greg Rucka comic. And that's not the whole reason why we invited Mick on, but let's face it, it helped.
Well, there is that. Why is that not the only reason?
We like your company.
Excellent. That was a fiver well spent.
Honestly, though, it is based on the comic, but you wouldn't know it to look at it, basically. It doesn't have, the telltale trappings that this is a comic book movie. They haven't advertised it as such, because suggesting that advertised it as such would be suggesting that Netflix advertised.
Yes.
Yeah. I must admit, it's not a comic book that I was familiar with before watching the film.
The title was familiar. The title was familiar, and I thought, the old guard. And I thought, I looked it up. I was like, oh yeah, I recognise that issue number 1 cover. That's as my my knowledge goes. It never really appealed, to be honest. But Image comics do tend to be a bit less superhero oriented and more sort of eccentric and weird in some of the ideas that they peddle.
And Rucka himself has a background in crime comics more than superhero comics, or at least that's what I associate him with.
Yeah.
I mean, there's other things that are out. There was, I can't remember the name of it now, a TV show about Assassin High School, and the name is just totally gone from my head. That was another recent image.
If it was actually called Assassin High School, I'm going to laugh and laugh and laugh that you accidentally hit on the title there.
Well, maybe. Some things are just described as what they are.
Yeah. Say what you see. But The Old Guard it's about a team of essentially immortal mercenaries. There is
Deadly Class. There we go. Yeah. Deadly Class.
Oh, right. Okay. That was guessable, actually. We should have got that.
Yeah, it is really, isn't it? Yeah.
But yes, a team of immortal mercenaries led by, what is it? Andromachy?
Andromachy of Scythia.
That's it, yes. Yeah.
Of indeterminate age.
Much like Charlize Theron herself, she never gets old.
Well, you see, this is it. I'm beginning to think that this isn't a graphic novel about a group of mercenaries. I think this graphic novel was just inspired by Charlize Theron. I think it's a biopic.
Yeah.
But yes, it stars it features a group of assassins who are basically deathless. It's not like they will live forever and ever and ever. It's they will die at some point. They just don't know when that some point is. But in between that and now, they can die effectively a number of times. And in the background, there's Chiwetel Ejiofor's character who's doing some dirty dealings dirty
Yeah.
dealings that bring on board Big Pharma, who is usually cast as a British character. That's never really a thing that's done with Big Pharma. But anyway, Big Pharma wants to capture this group of the Old Guard and do experiments on them for financial gain. And somewhere in there is a new member of the Old Guard, a new immortal. And that's basically 2 hours of plot.
Yeah, essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I take it we all weren't familiar with the comic going in.
I was familiar with one of the covers, but
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So you're our resident comic expert on this one, then.
Well, I'll be honest. It's irrelevant that it was based off a comic because there was news stories around it that said it's quite faithful, but there's one big change.
Mm.
And when there's one big change like that, you'll have all of the comic book. Sorry to say this, Mick, but all of the comic book nerds, questioning every little creative decision and being really snippy about it and sniffy.
I think that's a fair comment, Rob. To be fair,
I mean, look at Iron Man 3. Iron Man 3 is brilliant, but because it's not what the comic book fans want, it's the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't hold the Old Guard up to that level. Honestly, it felt like just sort of the sort of action movie you used to get before Marvel consumed all action movies. Just the mid-budget action romp in which a celebrity does some world trotting and does some violence. It's not really changing anything. It just is what it is.
What it felt like to me, and I'm a huge Charlize Theron fan. In fact, that's what drew me to this more than the fact that it was a comic book based movie.
Mm.
What it felt like to me, and I think this is something I've felt with a lot of Netflix original movies that I've seen, is I think you're right, Rob. It is a mid-budget feel. It's like a TV movie pilot, like they used to do in the 80s and 90s. Where they do that 1.5 hour, 2 hour special.
Not even that far. The first episode of The Walking Dead was like that as well, so that's not that long ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it's unusual now, though.
Yeah, that's
to
true.
To do it like that. But it was a big thing, almost like a 2-part episode to kick something off and then run on with it. And that's what this felt like to me. It felt like because there was too much gap in the world that they built, the world of the Immortals. So you were mentioning that there were some rules about they die eventually.
Yeah. I mean, it's implied that Andy, Charlize Theron's character, must be maybe even thousands of years old at the point that we're in the movie.
The way that the powers of the healing powers essentially of these mercenaries work seems to be some kind of bell curve, because it starts off when they meet the new recruit.
Yeah.
With Charlize Theron's character complaining, why does it take so long the first couple of times?
Oh, yeah.
And then you get to a bit where Andy and the rest of the group's wounds heal within a few minutes, and they're back up and fighting. And then we get to the point where Andy's wounds aren't healing so quickly. It's like, well,
it's the problem with like comics, isn't there? It's trying to, I don't know how many issues it ran for or is running for, but they're trying to get a lot of the mythology of that run of comics into a 2-hour stretch.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and
maybe they're looking for like the big bullet points without actually thinking about the punctuation between those bullet points. If you get me.
But I think that if you look at something like Marvel, where they've got a plan mapping out a huge phased approach to stuff
until the death of the universe. Yeah,
you can afford, and that's just phase 5. But the problem is with this kind of film, and especially with sort of Netflix's almost cavalier nature towards pickups and cancellations, you've got to get it in one hit. you've got to do this as a sort of. You can leave a little bit of mystery,
Yeah.
but I think in this particular case, what they've done is they've done some rather clunky exposition in the middle about the history of the group of mercenaries, and I think that would have been better served, perhaps, giving us a bit more of the lore.
This was part of my problem with it. There is that big stretch in the middle where it is basically people explaining each other's backstories to each other. And the script is actually written by Greg Rucka himself, which, is a good idea in some ways, but it feels like a script that is written by a comic book writer. You can imagine all of these long flashbacks with voiceovers working very well when they're panels with text boxes, but in a film, it just kills the momentum of it.
And I think that is where it does feel like a comic book, and too much like a comic book. I mean, I'm a big believer that, if you're making a film based on a comic book, your job's half done because you've got your storyboards.
Yeah.
But a storyboard isn't the be all and end all. You've got the difference you've got with a comic book and a movie is that motion element.
Yeah.
So you can do things more efficiently in a movie. And I just feel that with that exposition piece, they missed that opportunity.
That, and you've got to have an actor say, "My name is Niall Freeman," and keep a straight face. Because that is the most comic book ass name I've heard in a while. Niall Freeman.
It would only be more comic booky if it was alliterative.
Yes, Niall Neiman.
Yeah, or Frida Freeman.
Yeah, I mean, there's another problem I had with it. I think it runs. Like those movies that we're talking about, sort of, I think they sort of died out, sort of late 90s, sort of mid-range action movie. You don't really remember any of them, but you always enjoy them in a sort of, that was okay.
Pass of the time, yeah.
Yeah. The thing that really hurts that for me was the framing of the action.
Right.
Because it's really badly shot.
Yeah.
I've mentioned this before on the show, or maybe I haven't. Maybe I've just thought of mentioning it and it never came around. But I can never make the distinction anymore. We've done so many of these things.
Yes.
There's a whole archive you could listen back to.
Jackie Chan says he hated doing American action movies because they cut too much. It doesn't give the performers the opportunity to show what they can do effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And these people in this movie, like Matthias Schoenaerts, who we not mentioned, Charlize Theron, other people who I'm not familiar with as much, they're not action performers. So you've got to sort of hide the fact that they're not action performers. But by doing that, you're getting this really, really choppy, almost handheld look where things are very hard to follow because it's so cut, you know.
Yeah, it's shot by Barry Ackroyd, who is Paul Greengrass's regular cinematographer. So I think there's a possible explanation for that, maybe. But I do see what you mean. At the start, I held out some hope that it might work. I kind of liked the kind of war movie feel of the early action and thought it might work, but as it got further and further on into the really comic booky stuff with the evil pharma company, I found it just drained the action scenes of a bit of character, really.
And there's like some really nice touches, though. I mean, there's a relationship with two of the supporting characters. I don't know the name of the actors because I can't remember the name of the characters. It's that sort of movie where if you're not one of the main three, whose name isn't said every other line, like Niall or Booker or Andy, I don't know who you are, frankly.
Yeah, it's Nikki and Yusuf, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a gay relationship between them, which I think has got some of the best moments of the film, frankly, because there's a real idea of genuine love there.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing isn't really treated that well in action movies. The gay character is always either a comic relief character or That's it, really.
I can't remember the last time I saw a convincing straight relationship in an action movie. But yeah,
well,
this
that's
is
true, yeah.
That's true.
this is genuinely untrod territory, and it made me want to like the film a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, I liked that element of the film. There was a definite story there. I would have liked to have known more about this, the rules of this world. I like the fact that they mixed up the types of weapon that they were familiar with. The fact that they'd adopted their fighting style to absorb the technological advances over the millennia or hundreds of years that they've been fighting. And that was reflected when Niall got involved because she only knew guns. I was disappointed with the ensemble cast, though. And I think it's a problem of these Netflix originals is that sometimes they reach so far for the title role or for the lead role that you end up with lower echelon supporting cast members. Right. I mean, I think when you've got Charlize Theron and Chiwetel Ejiofor as cast members,
same with Ty Shonett as well. He has like name value. He's within certain quarters. He's like a deal.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I mean, you've really got to hope that they bring their acting chops. I mean, I'm glad that Stephen Merrick, the greedy CEO, was in it because I didn't realise what Screech from Saved by the Bell's name was.
That is a weird performance, that isn't it? Can we talk about that? Because that's Harry Melling, who I think is a fine actor. I liked him very much in the last Coen Brothers film, but that is a performance that does not connect with the rest of the film at all.
I mean, the other
just
thing
is a character that doesn't connect. He's like he's introduced.
I very nearly forgave Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor.
Yeah, he's introduced. He wants to save the world. He wants to make people live longer. And then he's kidnapping people, and then he's stabbing people, and he's hiring mercs. There's no like escalation of that character. It's just that it's like improv, isn't it? And then.
It's almost like Harry Melling has taken this world-changing pharmaceutical greed merchant and thought, I'm going to use this as my audition piece to be the next incarnation of Joker.
Yes, and it's quite a weird character to put in there too, because I realise he's going to, torture people to get these breakthroughs, but at the end of the day, he is presumably going to make some medication that helps people heal faster or prolongs their life, and there's the germ of a sort of ethical dilemma in that, isn't there? Is it okay to make a small number of people suffer to benefit the multitudes? But you'd have to say the thumb is on the scale when the person representing one side of that debate is, as you say, playing the Joker.
Yeah.
And there's no sense of character to that. It's just plot beats. He's a vehicle for plot beats.
It's almost like Copley and Merrick are one character split in two.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
So one is the evil side of it, and the other one, Copley, is the one who's actually got that ethical doubt and that possibility of a redemption arc.
Yeah.
And to me, that reduced Ejiofor's character to repeating the character he played in Serenity, who starts off on the side of the devils, and then, actually, no, they were right all along.
I don't like Serenity, but this is nowhere near that level of character. And for me to say that about a movie I don't like, that's saying something. I mean. Usually in a movie like this, they cast like a named martial arts guy as the head henchman.
Yeah.
And that just, for me, is the tip of the iceberg as far as the incomprehensible action, because that scene just made my head hurt. like the big final action scene
Yeah.
where you've got people jumping through doors and somehow jumping through a window that's supposed to stop like planes bouncing off it, but that man can do it. He can do it, no problem. It's the action is just the worst. It's why I don't like action movies anymore.
Mm.
You know, it's because they don't know how to shoot them.
The other big problem with me was the lost subplot
Ah.
with I don't know how to pronounce this, but a former comrade of Andy's.
Oh yes, yeah.
Queen. It's
I know.
Quinn. So it scores a shed load in Scrabble.
I think it was just Quinn.
But they show this.
Van Veronica and go.
Yeah, and again, it was that seed of an interesting idea because she's not getting wounded at the bottom of the sea. But does drowning count as a, is it you can only heal from wounds so many times, or is it that you can only die so many times? What is going on there? But then it was like this huge emotional outpouring about I left her.
Yeah.
And then, but it's all right because we saved Niall now, so we're all right.
It has a feeling of like an issue, like a graphic novel, or run like 6 issues, an arc, whatever you want to call it, that Greg Rucka really liked, and he just wanted it in there.
Yeah.
When they introduced that character, I thought, all right, she's going to have gone mad down there, and she'll be the villain, which, while not the most original plot twist, I think would still have been more satisfying than what then happened.
Yeah, and I think this is where ultimately the old guard falls down. It's what 125 minutes of potentially good ideas badly stitched together. Ultimately,
I think it would have been better served as well by dropping the pretense that it's a serious action movie, because it acts like the Van Veronica and Go one, and the history of the two gay characters, and all this stuff. It has like little nibbly bits that it might actually be a substantial, thoughtful movie. But at the same time, it's got an action movie at the ending where they just get shot for the fun of it, and it doesn't make any difference whatsoever.
Yes.
It's so goofy. I think if they leaned into the goofy and stopped pretending to be, I don't know, some like thoughtful movie, some art house movie, I think it would have worked a little bit better. Because at the core of it is an identity crisis that it just doesn't really come to terms with for me.
Yeah. Because I think that's the thing. It's either an action movie or it's an existential exploration of being a mercenary that can't die. But it's not sure which it is.
There is an awful lot of angsting about how miserable it is to live forever, which I've got to admit is not my favourite science fiction trope.
No.
Lean into the goofy if you're going to do a sequel, and it does hang the hook for a sequel.
Yeah.
Which I think is a bit cheap, but
I think, to be fair, just in this discussion that we've had here, we've highlighted the potential for several spin-offs.
It'd have been better as a miniseries, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, you could have a spin-off TV series where, the mercenaries go on missions, but now instead of Booker doing the jobs, it's Copley. And, we could have a spin-off called, I don't know, Copley's Immortals Full Throttle.
Like a collection of 6-episode limited run series, I think would serve this material much better than trying to ram all this mythology in a 2-hour movie, which is just nuts.
And I think we've covered this on 4Panel in the past. The fact that where Marvel have struck out well in the movie arena and been successful, and DC less so, but the flip is true on the small screen. Is because it's the kind of thing where you want those characters and those relationships to breathe.
Yeah.
And the world to breathe, to have a chance to be built up, because it's a lot of info bombs that you're throwing in there.
I think the budget might have been better as well, because honestly, the regeneration was cheap. It was just cheap-looking CG.
I thought the biggest sign of that was when, towards the end, something big happens involving falling out of a skyscraper. And that scene ends up on the most deserted street in London city centre that I have ever seen. You think, wow, I mean, I know lockdown's been pretty strict, but...
Yeah, well, that's it. They filmed it during lockdown. It was easier to get permission.
So recommendations for this?
Recommendations for this, yes, quite difficult.
Well, I've got one.
Yeah.
It's quite literally the same thing, but Japanese, and by Takashi Miike, and therefore 100 times better.
Yes.
Because if ever you need a man which will lean into the goofy wholeheartedly, it's Takashi Miike with the movie Blade of the Immortal.
Oh, yeah.
Which is about a samurai who ingests some sort of tapeworm, which regenerates his wounds instantly, but he scars badly. And it's got him fighting hundreds of samurai and him stabbing another samurai with about 20 swords, just at once. It's amazing fun. And yeah, I think that's what this one's missing. It doesn't know the fun in the concept.
And at the risk of engaging the ire of Aidan, formerly of this parish, I'm going to go with Atomic Blonde, because that's an action movie with Charlize Theron, based on a comic book, that does work.
I think it was Aidan, not Ryan, who put it in the bottom of his year when it was released. It was one of his most hated movies, which I thought was a bit harsh.
Yeah. I mean, it depends. If you're looking for an Oscar winner, potential best film, yeah, it sucks. But if you're looking for an action movie based on a little-known comic book that's got a lot of fighting in,
yeah,
it wins.
Well, in the spirit of Rob's answer, I would like to nominate a film which does that fantasy-based action premise with absolutely gleeful goofiness, which would be Nuit Rouge, also known as Shadow Man by George A. Franju. But to find out more about that, you'll have to tune in next week.
He's hanging a hook there. Sequel bait, he's hanging there.
I was inspired by this film.
Hold on. Are you secretly Mr. Netflix?
Ted Netflix.
I've never seen you and Netflix in the same room.
Thanks for checking out one of the podcasts in our merry little family. We really do appreciate it. Podcasts aren't all we do. We also make strides into the world of video. If you like what you've heard and want more, then head on over to YouTube and search for The Geek Show. On our channel, we have video game and low-budget tech reviews, video game chatter in Press X, animation discussions in Keyframe, movie visual essays in Shortcuts, needlessly nerdy lists with Listomania, interviews from our travels, and much, much more. The future's bright, and who knows what else it holds, so don't forget to search for The Geek Show. Subscribe and click that notification bell to stay up to date.
This is voice actor Bryce Papenbrook, and you're listening to the Geek Show Podcast Network.
Well, if you're enjoying what you're listening to, there are several ways you can help us out, all of which would be greatly appreciated. You might, for instance, you might choose to donate actual money to us via our Patreon at www.patreon.com/thegeekshow. Or if you wanted to do something absolutely basic that still helps a ton, leave us a review on your favourite podcast provider, iTunes, Acast, Podbean, wherever. We'll read it. It helps with our analytics, and we will misguidedly promise to read it out on air. A promise that cannot go wrong.
You don't even have to do anything as grand as that. You can just share it with your friends on social media. That is literally the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, every little helps. And speaking of social media, if you want to subscribe and follow us and get all the latest news about what we're doing next, we are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook as TGS_The Geek Show. welcome back. And if you go over to thegeekshow.co.uk, you can find some of our written reviews of films that we don't do on the show. I myself, for instance, I'm currently working on a review of Eureka's new release of Mr. Vampire, the preposterously entertaining Hong Kong action comedy.
I'm still surprised now that you took to that so well, because it's so there's like artistic Asian cinema, and there's so goofy that you have to be something a bit damaged to like it, Asian cinema. And Mr. Vampire is literally the latter. It's like a textbook latter.
But it's so beautifully made. That's the strange thing.
But hold on, you mentioned you have to be damaged to enjoy it. You've met Graham, right?
Yes.
Oh no, he's lovely, Graham.
You can be damaged and lovely at the same time.
Also coming on the website is I've got Free Outlaw Samurai, because it's a samurai movie and I'm here, so
yeah, we don't like to stereotype our contributors, but sometimes you got to.
When the shoe fits, you wear it, and in this situation I am Cinderella. And there's also a Gamera.
That makes us the Ugly Sisters.
Well, if that shoe fits, you can also. There's also a Gamera box set which is heading its way to me, so that'll be interesting to see how I can review the same movie 8 times.
Yes.
She's always a challenge.
That's going to be a well-thumbed thesaurus.
Yes. For now, we have our question of the week, which, not saying this was inspired by our film of the week, except it totally was. It is, what villain do you want to recast? Some answers we got from social media. Jamie Sample says, I would love to recast Doctor Doom. Both series of films never got it right. Maybe the guy who plays Negan in The Walking Dead.
Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Hold on. Wants to recast Doctor Doom? Because that's the problem with the Fantastic Four movies.
It's a problem.
I will stand up and say it is perhaps the most glaring problem. There are things about the Fantastic Four that are tricky to get right on screen, but if you can't make a dictatorial Eastern European sorcerer with a metal mask who refers to himself in the third person entertaining, you should be legally prevented from writing movies.
I reckon maybe someone like Matt. I forgot his name now. Vincent Cassel. Vincent Cassel would make a good Doctor Doom.
Vincent Cassel would be great. A friend of mine, Ollie, keeps mentioning Dominic West. He'd be fantastic.
Yes, he would. He's good at everything, though, isn't he? He's one of those annoying buggers who's just good.
He's the David Watts of Hollywood.
Somewhere in a parallel universe where the Christopher Reeve Superman led to a massive boom in comic book movies, there is a parallel universe version of Fantastic Four with Brian Blessed as Doctor Doom, and it would have been great.
Yeah.
Other social media answers. Jess Cole says one that we've already mentioned, actually, Lex Luthor in Batman v Superman. Mikey Toes concurs. Lex Luthor in any future Superman or DCU movie after Jesse Eisenberg in Dawn of Justice. He was like some overzealous high school student. Maybe someone slightly older and not as manic, a bit more menacingly calm, like Gene Hackman in the original Superman movies.
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it, with Lex Luthor? He's supposed to be sort of self-assured, confident, hyper-intelligent, and manipulative. Not, and I've mentioned this before. I can't believe I'm doing 2 Saved by the Bell references. If Harry Melling in The Old Guard is playing Screech grown up, then Jesse Eisenberg in Batman vs Superman and Dawn of Justice is playing Screech's younger brother that Screech finds annoying.
What is it that made Screech such a key influence on modern superhero movies? And finally, the last answer we got on social media, Andrew Young of our sister shows 4Panel and Behold simply said, insert literally any villain's name here with Mads Mikkelsen.
Not
That's a
any,
good point.
but
Well, certainly not the ones that Mads Mikkelsen has already played. Recasting the villain in Doctor Strange with Mads Mikkelsen would lead to some weird infinite recursion thing like an MC Escher
However,
painting.
one which I think he would have done well is, if we're talking about Marvel movies, is Malekith. I think he was well cast anyway.
Yeah,
But if you're going to do that movie again and do it right, he'd make a very, very good Malekith.
he certainly would. Yeah, yeah.
Malekith.
My answers. I think Muppets Most Wanted is a delightful movie, and it would be considered one of the all-time great Muppet movies if it wasn't for the fact that Constantine's henchman is played by Ricky Gervais in absolute "where is the paycheck? I'm bored now" mode. I think if you imagine a version of that movie where he is replaced with Paul Giamatti, it's infinitely better.
There's another case of put him in anything and it's instantly better.
Completely. He's a 14 times subscriber, Paul Giamatti.
Ah, as if I don't need another reason to like him. That's fab.
Exactly. The other answer I had was, I thought that second Jack Reacher movie was a little better than the first, but I can't remember who played the villain in it, and nobody forgets who played the villain in the first one.
Oh yeah, that was an iconic turn. That was
Completely. Because it's Werner Herzog essentially playing himself. And
yes.
I think the Jack Reacher franchise's gimmick should be every movie Tom Cruise fights a different world cinema giant. I wanted Jack Reacher 2 to be Tom Cruise against the massed forces of Hirokazu Koreeda. And I just didn't get it. I'm disappointed.
Well, maybe at some point something like that might happen.
Maybe.
I think if I was going to recast anything, I always thought back in the days when Tim Burton was in charge of the Batman franchise, that it'd be interesting to see his interpretation of Batman, but with the 60s villains.
Yes.
So Cesar Romero instead of
Jack Nicholson. Yeah.
Julie Newmar or Lee Merriweather or Eartha Kitt as Catwoman.
Burgess Meredith as a Penguin too.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this to joke or anything, but I think Adam Sandler's got a good villain in him. If you get the Adam Sandler who was in Uncut Gems and Punch Drunk Love,
I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah.
the right movie, you think there's a great villain in him.
So.
But I've got two answers, one of which is baiting and the other one which is probably blasphemy. I'll go with the baiting one first. James Bond is a villain, totally a villain. He's a sex pest and he's a spy. Spies aren't people who you're supposed to be, looking up to as heroes. They look at your personal information. They are bad people. They do subterfuge. Subterfuge is not a character quality. Because I like him. He's great at subterfuge. Golden egg. Yeah. He's a bad egg.
To be fair, he's lousy at subterfuge. I mean, if you're good at subterfuge, you don't walk into a building and say, the name's Bond. James Bond.
That does damage his integrity as a spy.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like recasting the movies and turning Bond into the bad guy in those movies. Not so much an actor, just making the movies the right way around. He's the bad guy.
Having Le Chiffre as just some guy who's innocently trying to set up an esports network. Doesn't want you calling attention to his wonky eye because he got teased at school over it. Yeah, that works.
And then some British guy in a tux comes and beats him at the game and then kills him.
Yes.
What a monster he is. James Bond is such an ass.
And Jaws just becomes a sad, morose figure in search of good orthodontry.
Yeah.
So
that's bait. What's blasphemy?
I honestly think that Peter Cushing would have made a good Dracula.
Well, actually, it's quite a common misremembering. There's a lot of people think he did.
Ah.
I mean, it's Christopher Lee who's Dracula, but given his mannerisms, I mean, they're very much alike, except physically they're very different. But I think Peter Cushing would have made a great Dracula. Genuinely do. He has that vibe, you know, and I don't think he ever got the chance. I'm not 100% on Hammer history,
No,
but
I think there's a couple of like little anthology movies and other sort of horror thrillers where he plays a creepy villainous character, but they're not Dracula or a vampire.
yeah. But I thought he was just a great actor in general, but
Yeah.
I think that would have worked really well if it was ever. I mean, let's be fair. Christopher Lee hated being Dracula eventually.
I was
He
gonna
really,
say,
really hated it. So,
If nothing else, your suggestion would have made Christopher Lee a much happier man.
yeah. And isn't that just doing the world a solid?
Yes. So, round up with a bit of off the shelf. I've got something which is way out of my comfort zone. I don't know, Rob, if you've had any encounters with this guy before, but he's a Hong Kong director who is very widely acclaimed, called Johnny To.
Yes, half a dozen at least of his movies.
Oh, blimey, right.
Quite documentary and like lots of like handheld photography, very fast, almost improvisational in style. Yeah, he's got some tells as Johnny.
That's interesting. Yeah, a few of those I could see in this, which is the first Johnny To film I've seen. It's called Throwdown.
Not one I've seen. No.
It's out now on Eureka Masters Cinema. Eureka Masters Cinema have put out quite a lot of the Johnny To films that are available on Region 2. I think they did Mad Detective and a few others. But as I say,
I think that was a co-direction effort, Mad Detective. But yeah, there's a lot of that in Chinese cinema.
Yeah. This is, regardless, the first one of his that I've seen, and I really enjoyed it actually, which I was surprised by because it's a judo drama, and with martial arts stuff, I have the same feel that I often have with sports movies. You know, is this going to be something where I actually need to know something about martial arts to appreciate what it's doing? But I didn't think that was the case in this one. It's about judo, and it has, you know, it builds itself around the one fact that even dunces like me know about judo, which is that it relies on using your opponent's strength against them. And when we first see one of the three lead characters, he's using that for essentially a scam that he goes up to the biggest doorman he can find, says, "I bet you $100 I can't beat you in a fight." The doorman thinks this seems like pretty easy money, and then he just judo flips the guy into the nearest wall. It starts off as quite a low-key drama. Again, it has that sports movie feel. There is a cut between someone eating like a cheap ready meal and then a blank wall with the sound of feet squeaking on the floor as a judo match is played on the other side of it. That reminded me a lot of Bennett Miller's film Foxcatcher, which is about wrestling. I wondered whether that was maybe a conscious influence. But it then develops into something else. It becomes slowly, naturally, almost imperceptibly a gangster drama with real life or death stakes, and I was fascinated by the way that it unfolds. That it's about a guy called C.T. Bo, played by Lewis Koo, who is a former judo champion but is now thoroughly gone to seed. He spends all of his days getting incredibly drunk in a sleazy karaoke bar. He is approached by two figures who want to bring him out of retirement, one of which is a younger judo champion, Tony, played by Aaron Kwok, who was inspired by him when he started out and wants to have a match against his hero. One of which is a more ominous figure from his past, an old rival called Lee, played by the great Tony Long. Do you think Tony Long's collaborated with more great directors than anyone else in cinema, by the way?
He is just one of those people. He gets around, and that's like a who's that cast is like Johnny Bingo.
Yeah.
Like those guys are in all of his stuff.
Right.
Lewis Koo especially.
I think they all give really great performances. It situates itself intriguingly in between the kind of melancholy sort of Asian gangster dramas that you might associate with, say, a Wong Kar-wai or a Ho Xiao-shen, and something that is a more conventional kind of sports-based action film. And it is inspired, according to Toll, by Akira Kurosawa. In particular, Kurosawa's debut film, Sanshivo Sagata, which I have to admit I have never seen. It's not one of his most famous titles, but in it you can see echoes of other Kurosawa stories. I mean, the theme of alcoholism is obviously perhaps inspired by Drunken Angel. There's a sequence where you see a montage that you've seen before from a different perspective, which of course harks back to Rashomon, which I don't know about you, but I thought that was Rashomon was a shocking rip-off of that X-Files episode with the town full of vampires. Surprised Kurosawa didn't get called out for that, to be honest.
X-Files is great.
I've been thinking about the X-Files a lot. Radio 2 played Wonderful, Wonderful by Johnny Mathis, and I had something like post-traumatic stress flashbacks.
One episode where the guy who lives in between walls and in escalators, I had sleepless nights about that when I was a child.
Yes, yeah.
And now it's on at 2:00 in the afternoon. But anyway, Johnny Toe.
Johnny Toe. I was gently happy that you took me down memory lane there, because obviously there's not a great deal I can say about Throwdown. It's a work by a director I'm unfamiliar with, in a genre I'm unfamiliar with. But what I can say is that the thing works, and it works for an audience member who was pretty skeptical going in. Wasn't sure, whether this would be my deal, but I think it has an investment in character. There's a lovely subplot with Cherry Ying as a wannabe singer who's being sent to sleazier and sleazier entertainment industry gigs by a manager that has a real kind of tragic sweep to it. I think it's full of narrative switches and trickbacks that are very inventive, and it just looks really good. I'm glad I watched it. I think it's a pretty strong piece of work, and that's out now on the Eureka Masters of Cinema.
Johnny Toe is probably best known for his work in the 1990s Hong Kong action scene that was world famous.
Right.
But he was like the realist of that movie. His action is probably the best, some of the best that scene has, without shadow of a doubt. But it has weight, and every bullet feels like it has impact. And he really, really, really values character and gives these characters time to breathe and to develop and grow.
Well,
so it's understandable why he's got a major stature in the Chinese film industry.
So coming up next week on Cinema Eclectica, we've got, as I cleverly teased before, I'm just like I view myself as almost like a modern TV showrunner, just throwing in hints to be picked up in the future across these podcasts. We're doing Shadow Man, the last film by Georges Franju, the legendary French director of Eyes Without a Face, Spotlight on a Murderer, and many, many more. That'll be next week. But until then, that's your lot from Cinema Eclectica. I've been Graham.
I've been Mick.
And I have been Rob.
See you next week.